And now I have the pleasure of beginning to introduce our presenters for this evening. The log houses on Chapel Lane. Well, Chapel Lane was not Chapel Lane when I was growing up. It was just that road. And some people might have called it Muckian Road.
It was called Muckian Road. Yeah.
But I don't think I ever heard it referred to that way. But I'm sure people did. I was just a kid. What did I know? But I did find a little article in the Door County Advocate in 1966. And the Bailey's Harbor correspondent was talking about some road improvements in town. And she described one was on Chapel Lane, one was on Howard Avenue between Main Street and Guy Street. And the last line of the article was, might as well get used to our street names now that we have them. When I looked back through some other materials, I found that this came up at town board meetings, house numbers and street names, and it was like, it's just irritant. It was like an irritant. People just didn't see the point of it. But I think it was the building of the fire station that really spurred those changes, so that if there was a fire, you could be found really, really easily. It makes a lot of sense. Well, about 100 years ago, some log houses started appearing on the south end of Bailey's Harbor along what is now called Chapel Lane. These were not log cabins of the one-room, hard-scrabble, must-have shelter to survive type. You may recall that little Fonz cabin from the last meeting. Not like that. These homes were principally second homes, summer homes. They were built to allow families to spend at least part of the summer rusticating in the cool lakeside climates of Bailey's Harbor. Many were built by local expert builders, and each is unique unto itself. Roy and Jill Cole live on Chapel Lane, and Roy and his daughter Danita, this is Danita, my mic holder here, will explain how this bucolic, beautiful little street developed. I'm sure you will enjoy it very much.
My name is Roy Cole. I live on Chapel Lane. I spearheaded this project, meaning that I had a lot of help from a lot of people. And it didn't happen easily. It came with a lot of help and over a year's time and quite a bit of money. The money is used to take the photos. We had to get permission from the owners to go on their property to take these photos, and we're very happy that we did. I would, at this time, like to introduce my daughter, Danita Cole Medved.
Hi.
She is hopefully a future resident on Chapel Lane. And I elected to see whether my voice would hold out as long as it would, a few other things. And I decided I'd find the best voice for you. And my daughter will take over at this time. And she's very familiar with what I've done all along. So good luck and break a leg.
All right, can you hear me now, as they say? All right. Thank you, Dad. I've had the sideline seat for the last year or so, watching Dad reach out to the other owners of properties on Chapel Lane, hiring the photographer for the photos, getting the permission forms. And I've also had the opportunity to watch when other owners came by with photos and with stories. It's been a delightful process, and I'm honored to be a part of it tonight. Thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to share information with you about Chapel Lane. Log cabins have been gaining in popular culture and increased construction in recent years, but Bailey's Harbor has a very unique asset. There is a significant collection of log cabins on one street, Chapel Lane. Many of them were built within a very short period of time, 1922 to 1926, in fact, just 4 years. And at least 4 of them were designed by the same architect, but a little bit more on that later. For those of you not familiar with Chapel Lane's log cabins, tonight we'll share some history with you, and the program's also being filmed so others who aren't here can look at this in the future. We're also lucky enough tonight to have some of the other cabin owners tonight with us. I'll be asking each to stand, or former owners if you're here. I'll ask you each to stand when we get to your cabin. Please, after the program is over, reach out to these owners. I'm sure they'd be happy to tell you lots more than I can cover tonight. So, some history. Chapel Lane is only 1/3 mile long. Tiny little street. But it hosts 9 properties with log cabins, log garages, log workshops, a log outhouse, a log potting shed, and even one log-inspired treehouse. 2 of the first cabins were built in the early 1920s by F. DeForest Shook and Frederick Victor Poole. Both of those gentlemen were professors at the Chicago Art Institute. Those 2 gentlemen virtually started the art movement in Door County before there were galleries on every road. They were employed to run a federally funded program under the Vocational Rehab Act of 1917 for art education and rehabilitating World War I veterans. The school operated for only 3 summers, 1923, 24, and 25. It's known that Professor Shook drew the plans for 4 of the homes on Chapel Lane, and others, quite frankly, are suspected to be his work based on the details of the style and the time of construction. Chapel Lane's name, it's based on the historical use of the road. If you don't know it, until the 1990s, this little lane was the only entrance to Bjorkland and Chapel, hence its name. The Chapel Lane sign. This sign has been passed down to different residents of Chapel Lane through the years, who annually install, maintain, paint, and store it every winter to keep it out of the elements. A map. Prior to 1922, Town Road, which was subsequently named Muckian Road, and it was named Muckian Road because the Muckian family owned the land that would eventually be subdivided and become the lots that are now on Chapel Lane. But prior to 1922, Town Road and Muckian Road didn't exist. It wasn't there. You can see on the slide there's a blue circle around a little red trail. That little trail was a dirt road that was an extension of Frogtown Road. The dirt road ran right along the shoreline of Lake Michigan, east of the cabins. You might not be surprised that one of the owners objected to having people drive across his property. As a result, Town Road, then Muckian, now Chapel Lane, was built west of the cabins. Tonight, we're going to be taking a virtual walk down Chapel Lane, starting from the north and walking south, and we'll stop to talk about the log cabins and the structures along the way. All of the photos you'll see tonight were taken last fall by Len Villano. You might know his name from the Peninsula Pulse, with the permission of the owners. Tonight, you'll be able to see some parts of the properties that aren't visible from the road, and the wonderful details captured by Len. Hope you enjoy it. So our first cabin is at 7748 Chapel Lane, the Hanson cabin. Is anyone from the Hanson cabin here tonight? Guess not. All right. This plot plan shows where the Hanson cabin is. The Hanson cabin is actually the newest addition to the Chapel Lane cabins. Bill and Fran Cecil purchased this log home in Pulaski near Green Bay. It was built in 1860 by Edward Johnson. Doesn't look like a log home. Like many log homes of this period, soon after it was constructed, it was covered with cedar clapboard to make it resemble a modern home. Log cabins were not very fashionable at that time. In 1990, after Fran and Cecil purchased it, the home was dismantled. Each log was numbered, and it was hauled to the Cecil's property on Chapel Lane next to the Victorian. And this photo shows the cabin with that clapboard removed. A second floor was raised, dormers were installed, and subsequently a garage was added. In 2018, the Hansons bought the log cabin. This is a view from the street. That's the new garage off to the right. And this is a view from the lake, the last photo of the Hanson cabin. This shows the skylights, the enclosed porch, and the balcony. Moving down the road, one property south, we come to 7740 Chapel Lane. Mom and Dad, you want to stand? Here's the plot plan for 7740 Chapel Lane. This property contains one log home, 2 log rental cabins, and a log workshop attached to the garage. The property was purchased by my parents in 2001, and as you might suspect, it's my favorite place on Chapel Lane, because my parents live there. And we've been coming to this property since my parents' friends, Bob and Joan Poppert, purchased this property in 1973. I virtually have no conscious memory of any Thanksgiving ever celebrated any place but on Chapel Lane. In 1925, this land, now called Lock Haven, was purchased from Edwin and Martha Carlson by Don Cole, not a relationship to ours. Also in that same year, in 1925, a stone outbuilding for a shower and toilet were constructed, and logs for the house and one cabin were obtained on a reused, repurposed basis from old barns on the Zach family property, and they were moved by horse and wagon to the site. If you think about that timing, 1925, an old barn was taken apart to be a cabin. So, 1925, how old was that barn? Let's say it was 50 years old. That old barn was constructed in 1875. How old were the logs in that old barn? Because you don't use brand new logs to make a barn. You use old growth logs. Well, if the barn was built in 1875 and they were using old growth logs, how old? Maybe those logs were 75 or 100 years old. Those trees would have been starting to grow in 1800, in 1775, right when our young country was just starting. Pretty amazing. This is a view of the street side of the house with a second floor addition and a first floor modification that was done in about 2006. This is a view from the lake of the house, including the screen porch. These are the cabins that are rentals as viewed from the lakeside. This is a vintage advertisement for the property that we found. It was then called Coal Cliff. The two cabins have been operated as rentals to tourists since their construction. Initially, both cabins shared the central shower and toilet until individual bathrooms were added in the 50s and 60s. And in this advertisement, you can see the large cabin rents for $50 a week, and the small cabin rents for $27.50 to $32.50 per week. And the big selling point was inner spring mattresses. This is a photo of the smaller cabin. This is a feature of the cabin, which is a ridge board portraying a dragon. And this is the larger cabin. And finally, a view of both the cabins and the house. So, we continue walking down the lane. One property south. We are at 7740 Chapel Lane, home to the Carlsons. The Carlsons have owned this property since 1923, and I know that Gil and Joyce are here. Can you please stand? Come on. All right. Oh, 7732. My apologies. I don't know. Typographical error. I have it 7732 on my script, but it's not on that. My apologies. So, Gil Carlson is the person with the longest residency on Chapel Lane. He was brought to Chapel Lane as an infant by his parents. Here's a picture of the plot map. You can see where it is located. This is Gus and Martha Carlson. They vacationed in Bailey's Harbor at the Sunrise Hotel on Lakeshore Drive, now called Frogtown Road. This is a picture of the Sunrise Hotel. It was later destroyed by fire. But the Carlsons enjoyed their first visit, and they returned the following year and purchased shore property on Muckian Road, now Chapel Lane. They had the log cabin designed by Professor Shook. You'll hear that name again, remember that name, and built by Frank Oldenburg. In 1925, the Carlsons spent their first summer in the new cabin, and they called the cabin Grandsatter, which according to Gil means evergreen site. This is a view from the street, the cabin with a dormer window, and that dormer window leads to a second floor loft area. This is a view from the lake of the porch and the second floor. This is the Carlsons' totem pole. Also, off to the left, you can see a log garage and workshop area. This is a slab log outhouse building, not in current use that we're aware of. And this is the Carlsons' log garage and workshop adjacent to the street. Also interesting on the property, you can see the stone pillars for the fence that run along the road. 7732, there it is right on the sign, 7732 Chapel Lane. So now we move one property south again. 7726 Chapel Lane, the Cooper property. The plot plan shows where the Cooper property is located, immediately south of the Carlsons. The Cooper property was built in 1921. This is a metal sign calling Pinecroft the Coopers, and you can see an outline of a dog, I think a poodle actually in that picture. We think that the sign was likely made by the Bailey's Harbor blacksmith, Albert Zahn. This is the Cooper log cabin as viewed from the lake. Or viewed from the street. This is from the lake, my apologies. You can see the porch. This is the vertical slab garage, which is the first garage on the Cooper property. Another vertical slab garage adjacent to Chapel Lane. And finally, the stone stairs and walls that lead from the Cooper property down to the lake shore. Aren't they beautiful? Moving on south to 7714 Chapel Lane, we have the Walter Cole cabin, known as Shook Shack. Is anyone here from Shook Shack?
It's the clerical.
I'm sorry?
Clerical.
On the ownership, it's referred to as Walter.
He went by Claire. That's all I know.
Okay,
Daddy Cole's husband was Claire.
okay.
Claire Cole.
Claire Cole.
Oh, that's a current.
Yeah, Claire Cole has passed away and current ownership is Walter. So here's the plot plan showing where the Cole property is located. Again, no relationship to us. A lot of Coles on this street. The house built on this property is known as Shook Shack for Professor Shook, an artist and one of the two professors from the Art Institute of Chicago. He built this home in 1922 and established in Bailey's Harbor the art school for the rehabilitation and rest of World War I veterans. If you want to know more about that program, the Bailey's Harbor Historical Society has already done a program on that, and that is available online. This is a picture of the art school dining hall with the professors on the left and the students in the rear. We believe Professor Shook is pictured third from the left. This is a sign that identifies Shook Shack. Also pictured is an L-shaped garage with both board and batten log construction on the part closest to the street, and then behind you can see log construction, all on the same building. Behind that log construction, at the very end, there's this lovely potting shed with a wonderful Gothic door. This is the cabin as viewed from the street. As I said, Professor Shook designed this cabin. He hired Bill Tischler and Frank Oldenburg to build it. 3 other cabins on Chapel Lane are also known to be designed by Professor Shook: the Carlsons, the Scholenthalers, and Hoax. Because of similar designs and time of construction, we also speculate that Professor Shook also designed Coopers and McAllisters, but we have not been able to verify. The next 3 slides show some architectural features of the cabin. This photo shows a very large window with 50 panes of glass. Some amazingly decorative shutters and a porch with the log supports. Another colorful shutter. The view from the lake, where you can see multiple roof lines, as well as windows with both shed, the flat dormer, and gabled dormers, which are the peak dormers. This is the last view of Shook Shack, also from the lake. Wandering again down the road, 7704, we come to the Scholenthaler property. Scholenthalers are here. Please stand. Yay! This is the plot plan showing 7704 Chapel Lane, currently owned by Robert and Mary Scholenthaler. This is a view of the cabin from the street. A little bit about its history. Frank Cole purchased land from the Muckian family, remember that name, and had a house designed by Professor Shook and built in 1924. This is a detail of the front door. A little bit more history. In 1945, it changed hands, and it was sold to Edwin and Almer Lindauer. And in 1990, the property was sold to Jay and Kathleen Willoughby, and in 1992 to the current owners, Robert and Mary.
Lindauers are here.
Lindauers are here? Please stand. Thank you. Thank you for coming. This is a view from the street with a well. This is a view from the lake. This is a detail photo on the lakeside. You see some wonderful stonework there on the base. And this is the...
Actually, if I can say so. We added that on. It was actually, apparently, Gerald Zach's grandfather had worked on the original part of the house, and Daryl and his crew worked on the addition, which is our master bedroom suite and a much-needed laundry room and another bathroom, because there was only one.
Nothing like continuing with the same craftsman that worked on the house and another generation later. That's great.
And the porches match on the outside.
Nice. This is the last photo of the Scholenthaler property. Even the treehouse has gotten into the act with a log cabin look. Now, as we move down the lane, we cross the street and go to the west side of the road to 7697 Chapel Lane, the pool cabin, which is also known as Burnt Hollow. More on that later. Anyone here from the Pool family? All right, very good. Please stand. Thank you. This plot plan shows the location of Professor Victor Pool's home. Professor Pool was the second Chicago Art Institute art professor living on Chapel Lane, joining Professor Shook. This is the only log cabin on the west side of the road. It's been told that Mrs. Pool did not enjoy being near the shoreline, nor did she enjoy the sound of wave noise. So they built on the west side of the road. This is a picture of Professor Victor Pool and his wife Amy in front of the cabin. It was built in 1922, the same year as his fellow professor Victor Shook was building Shook Shack just down the road. In 1935, there was a rather dangerous grass fire in the area west of Pool's cabin. This prompted the Pools to name the cabin Burnt Hollow. At first, Professor Pool used part of the cabin as an art studio, but this did not go well. because the reflective green light of all the trees outside bothered him. Think about wearing tinted green sunglasses and trying to mix paint colors. Doesn't go very well. He refused to cut down any of the trees that surrounded that cabin. So he built another studio in a clearing north of the cabin. That cabin, second cabin, no longer exists. This is a view of Burnt Hollow from the street. And off to the far left, there's also a winterized, more modern house that was later built on the property. This is the south side of the cabin, with the art studio on the west end, which would be to the far left. In looking at this photo, I marvel at the wooden supports of the porch that are there and are in such a solid state of repair and so marvelous now, almost 100 years later from 1922. Again, the south side of the cabin. And this is a close-up of the studio area and its entrance. That's our last photo for Burnt Hollow and the pool cabin. So we continue down the road, still heading south, back on the east side of the road to 7694 Chapel Lane, the McAllister property. This property was also used to be known as the Anderson property. There's the plot plan for the McAllister property. This is a view from the street of the L-shaped cabin. The cabin was built in 1926 by Walter and Marion Donna and sold in 1940 to George and Edith Kiln. He was a furniture manufacturer from Chicago. The south side of the garage is pictured here, as well as a connecting log building to the main cabin. The garage is notable because it used to house a rather unusual site for Door County. During the Kiln's ownership, Klein, thank you. During the Klein's ownership, it has been said it held a long black Cadillac limousine that was driven by their chauffeur. After the Klein's death, the property was owned by their daughter and son-in-law. Subsequent owners since then, the Andersons, of course, and now the McAllisters. This is a view from the lake. Note the use of elaborate stone footings and pillars, wood shingles, and even some more modern steel roofing. This is the south side of the house. And this is a close-up of some of the log square notches. As a side note, because everybody seems to ask when you own a log home about log construction, here are a few details. Logs have flat sides for log cabins. Trees are round. It takes a great deal of effort, a lot more of time with an axe, to flatten and square the sides of a round log. Old growth trees are preferred because they're denser and the close grain shrinks less over time. All log structures have notches on either end. If either of you ever remember playing with Lincoln logs, you're going to remember that. The notches are pinned together with wooden pegs, or in the case of more modern structures, screwed together. And the cracks between the logs are filled with chinking, or sometimes called daubing, made from sand, cement, and lime. Modern log homes use a manufactured substance called permachink or log jam. This is a view of the boathouse and pier from the lake. And this lovely photo that you saw when you came in was probably taken in the 1920s or 1930s. You can see in the foreground a person playing tennis. That tennis court is still there today. The McAllister cabin is in the foreground, and two other cabins are in the background. The Schoenthalers and then Shook Shack are plainly visible. You'll also notice, if you compare what this looks like now to this, far less trees and far less other outbuildings. But great photo. Now we're arriving at the far north end of Chapel Lane. South, sorry, confusion. I'd call it the last house on the block, but there aren't blocks. 7684 Chapel Lane, the Hoke Cabin, also known as Hoke's Seven Gables. This is the plot plan. You can see it Hoke's down at the far end. We've walked all the way down. The Hoke Cabin, Hoke property is located adjacent to the entrance of Bjorklanden. Again, there are stone fence pillars that run along the road. There's a log garage with living quarters on the second floor. And on the garage, at the very left to the garage door, there's an interesting plaque. The plaque identifies the property as Hoke Seven Gables. And this is yet one more property designed by Professor Shook. This is the rear entrance to the garage living quarters. This is the front of the house. The house was built in 1932 by Henry Van Wingen. In 1973, was sold to Martin and Donna Knauer, and it purchased and remained in the family until 1990 when it was sold to Elizabeth Hoke. Elizabeth and Charles, thank you. Elizabeth and Charles Hoke. You can note in this window that the windows have been covered. These photos were taken last fall, and the windows are covered with wood as a protective covering against the winter weather. Did you notice these little lumps on the roof? They're called eyebrow windows. They're small hump-shaped windows, and actually eyebrow windows come in all sizes, but these are small hump-shaped windows. And the goal of an eyebrow window is to let in light into a dark space, usually an attic. And you use those instead of having to have a dormer installed to let in light. So these are a wonderful example of eyebrow windows. This is a view of the south side of the cabin, showing the boarded up porch that extends around 3 sides of the house. This is a view from the lake. It shows a newer L-shaped addition, but it also has eyebrow windows on it. So great job with the architectural detail on that. This is the boathouse, which has a first floor living area. And our last photo, also the boathouse, with a lovely balcony and a view to the lake. Anyone from the Hokes with us tonight? Yay, Stan, congratulations. Thank you. We've reached the end of Chapel Lane. These are the stone pillars supporting the gated opening to Bjorklanden. As you can see, in the 1920s and the 1930s, this was a busy little lane. 6 of the 9 cabins discussed tonight were built between 22 and 26, and the lane was home to 2 art professors from the Chicago Art Institute, Professors Shook and Poole. Professor Shook designed 4 of the Chapel Lane cabins, perhaps more, and it was quite the neighborhood, and it's almost 100 years old. Our thanks to those people who have shared information and memories to make this program possible, and our thanks to our photographer, Len Villano. Without his images, this program would not have been possible tonight. As you might expect, there's a great deal of work by many people that went into this, that whole list. But we've really only scratched the surface of what's known about Chapel Lane. It's our fondest hope that this presentation will spark some conversations, stir some memories. Maybe others will do more research and additional presentations to learn more about this unique group of log cabins and their stories. These cabins have great stories. They were constructed of old growth trees, easily from the 1800s or the late 1700s, and they're still here today. They have outlived those who first envisioned them, first designed them, first built them, first owned them, and first loved them. There are multiple generations that have passed through these doorsteps and called them home. I like to think we're only fiduciaries of properties like this. We can only do our best to preserve them and improve them. They're certainly going to outlive us all. Thank you for joining tonight. Appreciate you being here. We hope you enjoyed the program, and perhaps we'll see you on your own walk down Chapel Lane. Yep. I'll stand and hold for you.
Well, thank you so much, Danita. That was a fabulous presentation. And I do have one observation that I could not help but making, and that is that it is my belief that Professor Shook never had to wash a window in his life. That's what I think. I don't know if we can prove that, but...
All 50 panes?
Well, yeah, 50 panes, come on. Also, just would like to point out to you, if you have any interest in the builders, Frank Oldenburg was a pillar of Bailey's Harbor. During his life here, he was one of the founding members of the Ridges Sanctuary and served as an officer, maybe president, for many years. There's an article on him in one of our newsletters, use the index, if you're interested in him. And Bill Tischler, I believe I'm right about this, was the father of Charles Pat Tischler that we did a program on a few years ago also. And they're just super interesting. There were many facets to these guys. It wasn't just building. Does anyone have any questions that you need to direct? You must have done an excellent job.
No, we do have a question in the back there.
Oh, all right.
Where the Art Institute was on that map?
The art school, it was actually on Frogtown Road. It was not on Chapel Lane. The art school was on Frogtown.
Was it right next to?
Just about across from that little cottage on the corner, or not on the corner anymore, but the one they rent out, next to the place with the picket fence.
Okay.
Just about across.
All right, so it was,
Give me the microphone, because in the back here, we couldn't hear his answer here, please. Is there a microphone somewhere?
No.
I can repeat it. Gil said that it was located near the corner where Frogtown turns. There's a big gray house there now, and next to it there's a smaller yellow cabin, and then there's a house with a wonderful picket fence. Right in that area was where the art school was located. On the lakeside? Okay, not a lot of land there anymore for anything. Okay, so that's where the art school was. Yes?
Had anyone attempted to speak to the Shook family about his papers or whatever?
The question was, has anyone attempted to speak to the Shook family about his papers? One second.
I talked to Walter Cole. Walter Cole is the son of Clara Cole, and Clara Cole is the son of
Claire Cole married Professor Shook's daughter.
Yeah, but Frank Cole started the whole thing off. Frank Cole to Claire, and then Claire to Walter. And he has some details and promised to try to share it with me, but he's my age and not replying to emails and a few other things. So we'll hear from him.
But he lives in Portland, Oregon, according to my dad. My husband and I are heading out to Portland, Oregon in a month. So I'm trying to convince Dad to give us his name and number. And we'll offer to buy him a cup of coffee and learn more.
Yeah.
Stay tuned.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes? Wait.
I was a teacher, I don't need that. Frederick Shook and his wife lived in the small cabin. Our cabin was owned by the Cole family. They were both from Lombard, Illinois, and were best friends. The Cole family had 5 or 6 kids. So what Frederick did was he made our cabin very much like his own, but like our dining room is a lot bigger. Our table will seat 8 or 10 people, but it still has the same alcove as what the Shook Shack has. The other feature is Frederick and his wife had 2 daughters, Dottie and Jane. And their kids were the same age as the Coles. The Coles had 1 daughter and a lot of guys. And Claire Cole, one of the sons, married the girl next door.
Dottie.
Dottie. But not while they were up here. This was back in Lombard. The Cole family had lost it during the Depression, and the cabin had sat for a while, and that's when Lindauers had bought the cabin and remained in the family for 45 years. And they added on the bathroom. You gotta remember, you saw the one outhouse at Gil and Joyce's place. That side is where the old road was. So that's where everyone had their outhouses, was along that side of the road. And then, of course, plumbing came in, and all the fronts of the houses faced the lake because of that old road that was then taken out, which we're very glad.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. You can still see a few remains of that old road. The deer use it most of the time now in the winter. Yes?
I have a comment. Those of you who are familiar with American Folklore Theater, now Northern Sky, Jeffrey Herbst is the artistic director, has been from year 2, I believe. And he spent many summers at Bird Hollow.
Yes, he did.
Liked the area so much that he bought a house on Frogtown Road. You could recognize it by the very high fence around the garden, vegetable garden. It isn't working.
Any other questions or comments? I
guess we're done. Well, I think that the time has come where I get to dismiss you. I hope you had a good time. I hope if you're members that I'll see you at the brunch. And for the rest of you, let's get on that, get to the website, join up. Okay? Thank you so much.